العلم أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدمه. العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
طيب، إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So we'll carry on with the manzuma of Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Sa'di rahmatullahi alayhi wa Sa'di rahmatullahi alayhi rahmatullahi wasi'ah. We've reached the 12th line. And it's good to know that the beginning part of the manzuma takes a long time to explain and to understand, because there's a lot of masail and a lot of issues pertaining to the Qawaa'id that the Sheikh mentions at the beginning of the book. However, you will find that, and obviously the reason is because the Qawaa'id that he mentions in the beginning of the book are the Qawaa'id al-Kulliyah al-Kubra, the major principles of the Sharia, or the major principles of fiqh, and also principles that are lesser in degree in terms of how comprehensive they are, like in they themselves are kulliyah, like the qa'idah that we're about to take today. Like you will find towards the end of the book, you will find qawaa'id, or what is called tawabid, criterions or tawabid, which are specific to one chapter, which are specific to one bab from the abwab al-fiqh, which are specific to one bab from the abwab of al-fiqh. So the Sheikh today, we're going to start with the 13th, 14th, and the 15th. These three lines, the 13th, the 12th, 13th, and the 14th, are one main principle, and then two or three sub-principles that we can learn from there. So the Sheikh says, rahmatullahi alayhi, الدين مبني على المصالح في جلبها ودرء للقبائح. فإن تزاحم عدد المصالح يقدم الأعلى من المصالح، وضده تزاحم المفاسد يرتكب الأدنى من المفاسد. And the meaning being, يعني الدين مبني على المصالح, the religion is built upon common benefits. في جلبها ودرء للقبائح, establishing these common benefits and repelling harm, the things that are harmful to the creation. فإن تزاحم عدد المصالح, and if a number of common benefits clash, preference is given to يقدم الأعلى من المصالح. Preference is given to, and the servant should act according to the greater benefit. وضده تزاحم المفاسد, and the opposite to that, the opposite to the last line, is if more than one harm coincide or collide and clash. يرتكب الأدنى من المفاسد, then the answer is, or what should be done is that the least of the two harms is committed. The least of the two harms is committed. So before going into any of these principles, now, so I've divided this qa'idah. The main qa'idah is الدين مبني على المصالح في جلبها ودرء للقبائح. طيب. So this is just a talkhis or summarization that I've done of the principles alone. طيب. So where I've highlighted now and I've underlined, that's the main principle. So that's where the Shaykh says الدين مبني على المصالح في جلبها ودرء للقبائح. So the Shaykh in this line talks about the whole religion being based upon benefits, and based upon bringing about benefit to the creation and to the world in general, and removing harm. So this principle we can derive about 5 or different situations or scenarios. Inshallah, we'll look into every one of them in detail. Like in general, you've understood the main principle that I've highlighted. The first scenario is maslahatun khalisa, a sheer benefit, a total benefit, and from that is a tawheed and the iman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. al-wajib, this second column that you can see. So this first column, inshallah, I'll email the students this summarization when it's done. I hope to increase the principles every week and maybe summarize it into a table form. طيب. So نوع المصلحة أو المفسدة, the type of the maslaha and the mafsada, or the mafsada. طيب. And then the second column that I've now highlighted is ما الواجب فعله. What should the Muslim do if they are faced with any of these masalih or any of these mafasid? So this is a summarization that I'm going through now of everything that we're about to say or that we're about to study today, inshallah. The first one is if there's a maslaha that is khalisa, a maslaha, a complete benefit, which there's no harm in it. From that is we can use as an example tawheed, the tawheed of Allah Jalla wa Ala and the iman of Allah Jalla wa Ala. طيب. ما الواجب فعله? What should a Muslim do? يعمل به. المسلم يعمل بها. So this maslaha, the Muslim acts upon it. The second one is mafsadatun rajiha, or mafsadatun khalisa, or mafsadatun khalisa is more accurate. Mafsadatun khalisa. Now, mafsada, which contains nothing but harm, nothing but evil. From that is a shirk and al bid'ah and ma'asi in general. So what should a Muslim do? Al-Muslimu yajtanib tilka al-ma'asi. The Muslim stays away from these mafasid, or the Muslim stays away from the mafasid. طيب. Number 3, إذا تعارض مصلحتان أو تعارضت مصلحتان. So there's two maslahas and there's a clash between the two. There's a clash. مثلا, a Muslim walks into a masjid, and we'll look into these examples. A Muslim walks into the masjid, goes into the masjid, and there's about the Imam calls the Iqamah. The Imam calls the Iqamah, so the Imam's already standing, afwan, and the Muaddin calls the Iqamah. The person hasn't prayed the Ratib or Fajr, the two sunnahs before Fajr. What should they do? Should they pray the two sunnahs of the Fajr prayer, which is a maslaha, or should they pray the Farad prayer that the Imam is about to start now? So we have a maslaha clashing with another maslaha. What should the Muslim do? يقدم الأعلى. يقدم الأعلى من المصالح. الأعلى من المصالح. نعم يقدم الأعلى من المصالح. He does the one that is more that has the most maslaha, or the more of a benefit, has more of a benefit, and in this case it will be Salatul Fajr. طيب. Number 4, إذا تعارض مفسدتان. So there's two harms. What should a person do? مثلا, there's eating of a mayta, a carcass, or dying. So there's a mafsada of dying of hunger, and there's a mafsada of eating the mayta, or a mafsada of dying of thirst, and the mafsada of drinking alcohol collide. What should the Muslim do? يرتكب أو يرتكب الأدنى منهما. So يختار أهون الشرين. So you choose the lesser of the two evils. طيب. Number 5, إذا تعارض مصلحة ومفسدة. So there's a maslaha and a mafsada. A maslaha and a mafsada. A benefit and a harm. What should be done? The qaida is ضرء المفسدة مقدم على جلب المصلحة. Bringing about or preventing or repelling harm. مقدم takes precedence over bringing about al-maslaha. Lakin it is not unrestricted. So there are conditions for understanding this principle. Inshallah, we'll study it during that lesson. From these principles is that it's not possible for you to combine acting upon the benefit and leaving the harm. And also the second condition is that the maslaha, the benefit, must not be greater than the harm. That must not be greater than the harm. Lakin if we see that the benefit is present and it's greater than the mafsada, then we act according to the maslaha. مثلا jihad fi sabilillah. La shak, there's a harm in it. There's mafasid in it. We don't call it mafasid, like there's hardships surrounding or attached to al-jihad fi sabilillah. For example, a person can lose his life. Lakin the maslaha is greater, is much greater, which is bi'ala'i kalimatillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that the word of Allah can be most high. What do we do here? We act according to, or we implement the maslaha and leave off the mafsada. So we don't say dar'u al-mafsadati muqaddamun ala jalb al-maslaha. We don't say repelling harm takes precedence over acting according to the maslaha. So we can't say we're not going to go jihad because there's a mafsada of qital, or fighting. Now, then we look at the masalih and the types of the masalih. So there's masalih daruriyah. So you might want to write this down where I've highlighted. There's number one, masalih daruriyah, masalih that pertain to the very existence of insan, whereby if they don't do it, they can be harmed in terms of their wealth, in terms of their lives, losing life and so on. Then there's the masalih al-hajiyah. The second one is masalih al-hajiyah. Masalih that if a person doesn't do, they'll go through extreme hardship. For example, the rukhas for the ibadat, the concessions that we see in ibadat. For example, being able to not having to fast if one's traveling in Ramadan, mathalan, not having to fast due to the difficulty, or mathalan combining the prayer and shortening the prayer when traveling. So if a person doesn't shorten the prayer, it's not the end of the world. They won't lose their lives. Nor will they, if they fast during the day of Ramadan when they find it hard, they won't die because of that. Lakin it's better for them to break their fast. Al-masalih al-tahsiniyah. Then there's those masalih that are a completion or a beautification. And from that is mathalan, as we shall see, ikram al-dayf, honoring the guest and so on. And mathalan, for example, helping people out, helping them with their mathalan, lending them money, borrowing them money and so on. So that is a short summary of what we're going to cover today, inshallah. Also, what you can do is list all of the qawaa'id that we study. So every week, the more qawaa'id we study, the more you will write down. So mathalan, last week we studied al-a'malu bin-niyat. Al-a'malu bin-niyat. And then we studied al-ibratu fil-uqudi bil مقاصد والمباني. Then we studied من استعجل الشيء قبل أوانه عوقب بحرمانه. So we studied these three qawaa'id last week. And this week, inshallah, we'll study these three qawaa'id. الدين مبني على المصالح في جلبها وضرب القبائح. Then we'll study درء المفسدة مقدم على جلب المصلحة. And then we'll study يختار أهون الشرين. نعم, as the last principle. So every week, inshallah, it'll be easier for you to write down the principles that we study during the lesson or after the lesson. طيب. قال الشيخ عبد الرحمن السعدي رحمة الله عليه الدين مبني على المصالح في جلبها وضرء للقبائح. The word dana or the word deen means أطاع. يعني دان لفلان أي أطاع فلان. He obeyed فلان. And that's why Allah Jalla wa Ala says, Inna deena inda Allahi al-Islam. That's why our Sharia has been called ad-deen. So we obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for mabniun ala al-masalih, so that is the sigha. So the sigha is ad-deenu mabniyun ala al-masalih. That's the form of the qa'idah. Ad-deenu mabniyun ala al-masalih fi jalbiha wa dar'i al-qaba'ih. طيب. That's the sigha or the form of the qa'idah. The second thing that we're meant to study is ma'na al-qa'idah, the ma'na or the meaning of the qa'idah. Now, the meaning of the qa'idah. The general meaning of the qa'idah is that the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every hukum in the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been legislated in order to bring about maslaha or masalih to the creation in the dunya and in the hereafter. In the dunya or in the hereafter. Or in the dunya alone. Or in the dunya alone. Now, so all of the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is based upon masalih, bringing about benefits for the ibad. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that created this creation, this world and everyone and everything in it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what is best for it. So all of the ahkam, all of the awamir and the nawahi that we see in the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is masalih and there's harms, there's benefits in it for the ibad. And at the same time, at the same time, in all of the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is removing of hardship from the ibad, removing of hardship from the ibad. Naam. Mathalan, when we look at how important this qa'idah is, some of the scholars say that this isn't a qa'idah, it's not a qa'idah fi sharia. It is not a qa'idah within the sharia. So mathalan, the qawaa'id in the sharia is مثلا الأعمال بالنيات أو العبرة في العقود بالمقاصد والمعاني and so on, أو الضرر يزال أو اليقين لا يزال بالشك. These are قواعد في الشريعة. They're قواعد, they're principles that are implemented in the sharia. However, the scholars say that this is قاعدة الشريعة. This is the principle of the sharia. Meaning the whole sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is based upon this principle. The whole sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is based upon this principle. So مثلا al-a'mal bin-niyat, it goes back to al-masalih. It goes back to the masalih. Again, مثلا darar yuzad or la darara wa la dirar. It goes back to the masalih of the ibad. It goes back to the masalih of the ibad. That's why next week, inshallah, when we're studying this specific qa'idah, la darara wa la dirar, that is from the major principles of fiqh. Shaykh Abdurrahman al-Sa'di rahmatullahi alayhi doesn't actually mention, you'll probably remember when we studied this kitab the first time around, that there's no line specific to la darara wa la dirar. There's no line specific to this qa'idah. Lakin, some of the scholars mention this principle, la darara wa la dirar, under this line when they're explaining في جلبها ودرء للقبائح, and removing or repelling harm. So some of the scholars actually put this qa'idah. For example, Shaykh Khalid al-Mushaykh, the explanation which I'm using, he mentions this qa'idah of la darara wa la dirar, even though it's a qa'idatul kubra, he mentions it under this line. So qa'idatul kubra of la darara wa la dirar comes under this sharia, removing hardship. Na'am. So the scholars say that this qa'idah is the qa'idah of the sharia. Shaykh Abdul Salam, or Al-Izz ibn Abdul Salam rahmatullah alayhi, has a kitab called Qawaa'id al-Ahkam fi Islah al-Anam. In this book, he talks about this principle, and he talks about the different types of masalih and how they come about. Some scholars actually go as far as saying that this religion is based upon the first part of this principle, which is ad-dinu mabniun ala al-masalih. The religion is based upon benefits, bringing about benefits and completing benefits. How? Because by removing a harm, which is the second part of this principle, you're in reality bringing about benefit. Therefore, they say there's no need for us to say في جلبها وضرء للقبائح. Let's stick to the first one. الدين مبني على مصالح. The religion is based upon bringing about benefits, and in bringing about benefits, we will automatically be able to repel harm. طيب. The next point that we need to understand is who decides what is a maslaha and who decides what is a mafsada. مثلا الآن, when it comes to masalih and mafasid, there are three paths, or there are three types of individuals, three groups of people. The first group is those that say, or leave off all of the hikam, all of the masalih, and just do whatever they feel is necessary to do, without looking at the mafasid and the masalih, or the masalih and the mafasid. So مثلا they're faced with an issue, they just automatically do that issue, or tackle that, or go about trying to tackle that challenge ahead of them, without looking at the benefits or without looking at the harms. Then there's the second group. So مثلا that first group is do now, think later. regardless of the repercussions or regardless of the consequences, without looking at any maslaha mafsada. The second group, which is on the opposite side, they say everything, or they leave off parts of the sharia based upon maslaha. So mathalan, they'll say it's permissible for the Muslim woman, mathalan, to take off her hijab in a free environment, a free mixing environment. Why? Because the maslaha of her earning a living is greater than the maslaha of the hijab alone, or is greater than the mafsada of staying at home and not having anything to live on. Nah. So mathalan, they give precedence to the masalih and the mafasid, or they give it more than its haqq, more than the boundaries, or they transgress in using masalih and mafasid. Now, then there's the third group, and they are Ahlul Ilm, who look into the masalih and look into the mafasid. And then they give precedence to wherever the Sharia gives precedence to in any given situation. So مثلا يقدم الأعلى من المفاسد أو يقدم الأدنى من المفاسد أو يقدم الأعلى من المصالح or درء المفسدة مقدم على جلب المصلحة. The ones that are going to be looking at these principles are Ahlul Ilm. So they are those that take the masalih into consideration. They take the mafasid into consideration, and then they act according to, or their ijtihad relies upon the maslaha and the mafsada, and which one is greater, and which one can be repelled, and which one should be implemented. Naam. So that is obviously for those that say, obviously that is for, or that is the tariqah of Ahlul Ilm. Like, how can we know if something is a maslaha or a mafsada? How can we know if something is a maslaha or a mafsada? That's the next masala. We can know if something is a maslaha or mafsada if it has been mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah. In the Quran or the Sunnah or the Nusus. So the first way of knowing something is a maslaha is if it has been mentioned in the Quran. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاتٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. And in qisas there is life for you. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. How do we know these? اُعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُمْ مِنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرُهُ. How do we know these are masalih? Because they've been mentioned in the Quran. مثلا إكرام الضيف, honoring the guest. مثلا ولا يبيع أحدكم على بيع أخيه, not buying something that your brother intended to buy, or not overpricing him, and so on. How do we know these things are masalih? Because we find them in the Quran and in the Sunnah. We find them in the Quran and the Sunnah. So there's a question, kind of like a comment. Does the second group follow what suits their desires? Ahsanti, Jazakallah khair. So the second group, they follow whatever suits their desires. When we were talking about the three types of people or three types of groups when it comes to addressing and implementing masalih and mafasid. Masalih and mafasid. There's an online clip, there's a clip from YouTube that you can go back to. Sheikh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili hafidhahullah. He talks about that talks about this point more in detail. So they won't take into consideration what the maslaha is or the mafsada, lakin they'll take into consideration their desires, their need, and then say that is where the maslaha is. Or in this there is a mafsada. So mathalan, in wearing the hijab at school, there's a mafsada because women can't get education and so on. No. When we find that a lot, it's not just from fatwa. Like we find that on social media, mathalan, we find that on social media. So for example, you say clips like you hear people saying, those same people that are saying women can't study in free mixing environments will also go to the hospital and ask for a woman. They will ask for a woman. So they're saying that, mathalan, they're saying that those that say it's haram to study in free mixing environments for women, they have no intellect and they have no mathalan bu'd an-nadar, or they cannot comprehend the fact that tomorrow they're going to need a female doctor for their wives and families, so on. So they're looking at the masalih without looking at the mafasid. So they've said the maslaha, or the benefit of this woman studying in this environment, is far greater than anything. They've what? They've left off looking into the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in which free mixing is haram. Right. The third mas'ala, adillatul qa'ida, the evidence for this principle. Yani the evidence for knowing that the religion is based upon masalih and mafasid. قول الله سبحانه وتعالى في سورة الأعراف, or even before that, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. So in this day I have completed your religion for you, and completed my favor upon you, and have chosen Islam as your religion. Surah Al-Ma'idah, as Allah Jalla wa'ala says. So we find that if something is complete, then it means it brings about all forms of benefit and repels and removes all forms of hardship and harm. طيب. The second evidence is the statement of Allah Jalla wa'ala in Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 33. قُلْ إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ رَبِّيَ الْفَوَاحِشَ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ وَالْإِثْمَ وَالْبَغْيَ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ وَأَن تُشْرِكُوا بِاللَّهِ مَا لَمْ يُنَزِّلْ بِهِ سُلْطَانًا وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. All of these are mafasid that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned. The mahallu shahid is that Allah has made them haram. قُلْ إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ رَبِّيَ الْفَوَاحِشَ. Allah Jalla wa'ala has made haram all types of fawahish, all types of fawahish, zina and so on. ما ظهر منها وما بطن. All that is apparent from it and that is hidden from it, and sin and transgressing and talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge, all of these are haram. All of these are haram. Why? Because there's harm in them. Therefore Allah Jalla wa ala has made them haram. وقال تعالى وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. That is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ brings about all types of benefit. وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا removes all types of harm. Because by you worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you'll attain the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the beauty of looking at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yawm al-qiyamah. So the greatest, when talking about masalih, the greatest maslaha ala al-itlaq, and the greatest benefit is the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The tawheed of Allah Jalla wa ala. And the greatest mafsada is ashirku billahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. The greatest harm and the greatest mafsada is worshipping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah la yaghfiru yushraka bihi wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha. It is the one sin that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forgive if a person dies upon it. So shirk is the one sin that a person will not be forgiven for if they die upon it. And tawheed is the one sin that saves a person from being punished in the fire for eternity. So the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one act that can prevent a person from being in the Jahannam, in the fire of Allah Jalla wa ala, in the hellfire for eternity. Look at how they are on two different sides of the playing field. The tawheed of Allah Jalla wa ala, the greatest benefit and maslaha that can be sought, and the shirk of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, associating partners of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.